Yeah, so I got interested in contemporary music after my teenagers. When I was like 18, 19, I started to listen to modern jazz. I grew up in Trondheim, where there is a fantastic jazz education, and I went to almost everything there, concerts, international names, also student concerts, and I was deeply into it, and using my background from classical music to try to break the codes of jazz and also to play some myself. But there was never an option in my mind to become a jazz musician. What I wanted to do was to study composition. After hearing works by Ligeti and the Norwegian composer Arne Norheim, for example, I thought this is music that speaks to me, and it speaks to me now in this time, and it's possible to make music that's relevant for our society and not just have this old classical tradition that we are basing, also the modern classical tradition on, but that we actually have new music. And if you grow up in a non-artistic family, you don't know the existence of contemporary music because it's so hidden in the society when it's not up there in the mass media and television and all that. Yes, but it's been a long path. When I started composition, I tried to avoid this question about being a female composer because I consider myself a composer even though I'm performing half of the time. But I hated the question, how does it feel like to be a women composer? I didn't want that question. I wanted to talk about my music on the same level as the guys. They were asked about their music, but when it was my turn, then I always got this question. I had to defend on behalf of all women composers what it feels like to be a women composer. And as a young student, that is not very fruitful, and I didn't want to have the finger pointed at me, how different I was. Of course, I was the only female student studying composition, and there were no female composing teachers. There still is no female composer teachers at the Music Academy. I was invited to write a book called Experimentell kvinneglem. This is the title in English. Translates into something like experimental woman's barking. So glam is dog barking, hundeglam, kvinneglam. It's a play on the word. It's taken, actually, it's a quote. It's taken from the headline of a review I got in Trondheim, the city I'm born in. When I did a concert there with the violin player Pekka Kuusisto, who we just saw a glimpse of here, is a collaborator. This was the headline in Adresseavisen. I think it was in 2004 or 6 or something. So it's a quote, and it's a good quote for a book. Yes, so I was invited to write this book. The occasion was the celebration of universal suffrage, of women's right to vote. It was a 100-year celebration for that in Norway last year. So this Norwegian publisher, Aschehoug, which is one of the main publishers in Norway, they invited 12 different people to write one book each. And I was from the music field, and I had my point of view. So this was the first time I tried to answer the question seriously. What does it feel like to be a woman composer? And I wrote the longest book. I didn't know I had so much to say. It exists in Norwegian, by the way. You can't read it in English, I'm sorry. But it's possible to buy it in Norwegian. So in Norway, we have still to come over the barrier, but just talking about it. So we haven't come that far as you have in Sweden, where you have enormous critical discourse. We still have enough just to put words on the boxes, and that is a very important first step. So my book is a contribution to that. I was told to be constructive and to have an optimistic view on this. I'm trying to put in more of that in the end, but it's also important to talk about the background and how it feels like in the contemporary music world. So, being the only female student and with no female teachers in composition, that was of course more tough than I want to admit. I was I spent enormous amount of energy trying to fit into the boxes how I could imagine what it should be like to be a composer. Or I spent a lot of energy trying to invent my own box or definition of what an avant-garde composer or performer should be like. Also, there's a lot of negative and positive feedback that creates you during your student upbringing, and I saw also that in some way I could try to be more like the guys, or in other ways it was better not to do that, to use the positive attention I got because I was a female, and that was also encouraging. But so it's like this division between both sides. So then again, emphasizing the differences would also make me feel more confident on my own aesthetics. So I tried to use it as an advantage, the attention I got because I was so visible, being the only female. But then you also have to live up to it, of course. So the pendulum moving from on one side, trying as hard as I could to be one of the guys, adopting their codes, their taste, their language and behavior, and aiming at being best in their nerdy subjects of interest. And then on the other end, finding another language of being, and also starting to improvise with music, which was natural for me because I had been performing my whole life, and it was not expected from composers to improvise. But very important for me was the forming of the group Spunk with fellow students. We are still existing today. It's a band with 4 musicians. We are 4 women, actually. We started in 1995, and it's been very important to me. We call it like our common mothership or common platform for everything that springs out of Spunk. That is something that we have based our professional lives on later. And it's also a coincidence that we ended up being 4 women. We just had a very strong desire to play together. I was studying composition. One was finished studying, one was in a higher degree study, and one was studying jazz parallel with me. And we had this urge to create improvised music which was not genre related. We wanted to use our backgrounds from jazz, contemporary music, classical music, country, rock, whatever, to create a new language that was unheard. And this is also why we found the name for the group Spunk. That comes from a Pippi Longstocking novel, where she invents a new word, and then she goes out looking for it. She looks for something she doesn't know what is. I don't know what you have in English for that. It's definitely not spunk. So, this book. Back to the question, the title of the lecture. I had to look out of my own frame, out of the music world, in order to answer these things. So the book starts with the beginning. Okay, this is very loose, simultaneously translated. But Maja, I told you that you shouldn't talk when it's the news and weather forecast on the radio. My mother wants to listen to the radio, and we are at the kitchen, and a lot of things are happening at once. I go to kindergarten, and daily life is organized, and it's a lot to organize. But it's just the woman, is my reply. Of course, I don't remember that. My mother has told me this later. So I had already learned then, from I was maybe 3, 4, that when a woman speaks, then it's not so important. And this is in Norway. We have to know this, that this is happening. And I also become aware of this now when my kids grow up, how much they are affected by just role models in children television, also from everything around us, the daily life. So we have to put words on the boxes. So there's a whole chapter on these things also, that I'm not going deeper into now, but it's possible to read it later. And the story from the beginning of the book continues with some years later, when when we got our first Norwegian Prime Minister being a woman, Gro Harlem Brundtland, you all have an inner image of her. It's a picture of her in the book on the first page. Not that I admire everything that she stands for politically, but my mother showed me her on the television and said, look there, this is a woman. She decides everything. That I can actually remember. So my mother is a prominent scientist, so I grew up with role models, but still it doesn't help when the society is so so stuck in the old norms. So what inner image did I have of a contemporary composer when I decided to study composition? So this is my inner image. Maybe this is Arne Norheim, the most prominent Norwegian composer. He is dead now, but he was the modernist pioneer in Norway. And everyone knew him because we had only one state channel. So even though contemporary music was not exposed to people, we all knew who Arne Norheim was. And we were thinking that his music was some abstract, non-listenable music, like blink-blong music. That's what we thought about Arne Norheim, but this is what was my inner image. So my question in the book is also, would I have had that image that I would be a composer earlier if I was a guy or if I was a boy? And I think so, perhaps. I had been composing my whole life, but I didn't put names on it. I was not going to be a musician at all. So in the classical world, it's not come very far yet, still. In the Composer Society, there's 10% women. Norwegian Composer Society, it's been like that for 30 years. Slowly things happening there as well. They have recently joined Jämställdhetsprojektet, the balance project, we call it in Norway, which Camilla is running in Norway also. After the debate in the aftermath of the book, they have actually done that. They applied to become a member of that. In the year of celebration last year of women's right to vote, I took the program for the Oslo Philharmonic Orchestra and I counted all the orchestra works. There were 113 orchestra works, different works in the program. You can guess how many of them were written by women? One. So this is the situation of this part of my work. But I'm going back to the performing part because this is a jazz meeting. So what inner image did I have of a improv musician? Because my heart felt as strongly as improvising contemporary music as composing. So this is equally important. Like, what inner image did I have of this? No, okay, maybe this. Yes, I had an inner image of that as well. Of course I had. I chose vocals as an instrument, even though I had been playing violin and jazz piano. But when I entered the music academy, I had jazz vocals as my main instrument. So not being only different because I was a woman, but I was also a singer and a jazz musician. So it was three things that were totally wrong with me. Okay. But I've been using the voice in an instrumental way since I started to improvise with spunk. So the first years it was as a strictly focusing on sound making with voice. And I've come back to singing songs later on and then creating things. For example, with a group called Poing, where I sing revolutionary music. What I see, and also what I'm discussing in the book, is what happens when a woman steps out to the frame. And stepping out to the frame being a singer is by making sounds that are so they have different connotations than just singing beautifully and confronting the audience and giving people a narrative opening in the music. I mean, it's a lot of people who do that now, and it's fantastic. It's also been a long vocal tradition since Dada is doing that. But I see generally when a woman steps out of this the singer role box, then it's very often related to hysteria and madness, and it's less words on the music than on the emotional side of it. Here's a good example. I have so many examples of this. I didn't see this connection until I started to compile the examples when I worked on the book. Here's one example from a jazz magazine on my debut voice album in 2003. Så dette lydsporet til en gal kvinnes uberegnelige film. It's a very typical example. I have much worse things than this also. So this is a good friend, Jaap Lonk. He is a Dadaist sound poet from Netherlands. I haven't performed with him for maybe 8 years or something now, but we did a lot of concerts together. He's using his voice in a very liberating way, and everything is possible. I bring him in because I remember something, and I wrote that in the book also. When we did the tour in Denmark once, the Danish radio came to interview us. And Jaap was asked to comment on my vocals, on my way of singing. And he said that I wasn't afraid of not looking good when I performed with my voice. And I was really struck by him saying that. Did he need to say that, or is this necessary? And I've been thinking a lot about it later. So this is maybe then 8-9 years ago. And it struck me that this perhaps is an issue. I don't have an answer to that, but this is one of the things that you can think about, like why things become the way they are. The physicality of playing improvised music is very demanding. Also, it's very demanding, and it's essential to the music, also to the expression. Going back to Brødsmann, which we saw a picture of earlier, together with John McPhee. So there's a lack of inner images here as well, with female performers playing music in a physical way. But it's coming more and more. I'm playing with some wonderful female improvisers. For example, Joelle Leandre, who we saw a glimpse of there, and Ike Mori as well, Sylvie Corvaisier, Sina Parkins, and the women in Spunk that you haven't seen on the film. There's a lot more also. Guru Skomsnes-Mo, for example. So these women, they have nothing less than the men when it comes to the physicality of playing. So actually, I'm thinking that jazz music isn't a very macho thing. It's actually very soft and very delicate, because also there is nothing in the physicality of a women's body that hinders you from playing that sort of music. Even though you have people like Petter Brødsmann, who has outspoken that women can't play this kind of music. They don't have the strength. He has said this to people I know very well, so this is true. So when Petter Brødsmann created his version of Wells Unlimited, a huge avant-garde festival in 2011, it looked like this. And he is an artist as well. I've been to this festival 3 times. It's a very important festival in avant-garde music. So what happened was that he managed to create the whole festival. It's 3 days with just men. And the organizers, they forced him to look at the program again and invite some women. And he then invited 2 Asian performers. I think it was Michiyo Yagi and Okyung Lee. And they had to play together in the duo, so they were not like included and they're playing together with everyone else. But this is what happened. So, and here's a version of Brødsmann's famous quintet, and this is a very familiar sight as well. This is what it looks like, free improv music. It's guys having a very energetic exposition. And it sounds fantastic. And now, okay, this is a bit hard, but I'm just throwing it to you. But what happens then when the people he has taken under his wings, what happens when they are giving resources to form their own big bands? This happens. Yeah. I didn't realize how rare it was to be in the avant-garde being female until I started to get reactions around from people. And this is the next thing here. This is something that we heard in Finland. I played in Finland with Hild. Hild is also in Spunk. We used to have a noise band called Female. Female, like in email, it's a bad name, but still, yeah. But we played in Finland, and then someone came up to Hild and asked this question. So this thing about genres, yeah. What's the fuss about genres was another topic that I want to discuss here. I see also very often that the female improvisers that I play with, they avoid genre terms, and they are not so interested in it, and they don't feel that they belong to genres, and I don't know why. Is it because they want to create their own history because they haven't been a part of that history? That can be, but if the guys play improv, then it's immediately placed in jazz if they have a jazz background. But if the girls are playing improv, it could sound a similar way on the surface, but it's, well, maybe they are not interested. Also, the organizers aren't that interested in placing them into the jazz field. Also, the same with contemporary music. They don't belong there either, so where do they belong? So you have all these fantastic improvisers like Sina Parkins and Iku Mori and those people who aren't placed anywhere. So I think the box of jazz has to be opened up a bit, perhaps. But it's a contradiction because it has already opened up and included those guys who play, but not the women who aren't so concerned about like being labeled. With Spunk, we saw this very clearly because we didn't come from typical jazz studies, and it was also important for us not to play music in the jazz genre, even though we improvised. So it took 16 years before we played in the Norwegian Jazz Festival. And we have played in international jazz festivals everywhere before that, because we were distributed by a label that had distribution through ECM. So we got out there, but there was no question then where we belonged. So I'm very tired of the genres and the boundaries between all the music styles. I know it's difficult for people who organize and decide and give stipendias and give cultural money to deal with people like me having these thoughts. My observation, which I want to share with you, is that many women feel the same way that I do, that they don't belong. And we have to make them central in the utvikling, in the growth. It takes a lot for a female to be considered central in their box, in their ism. Females are not the ones who create the isms. They are there after it's created, after the history is also created, and this is also something to think about. Like, what does that mean? Yeah. So I talked about this band called Female, and it existed for 5 years. In the noise world, it's not institutionalized at all. Here we have an institutionalized world for a genre, and in contemporary world, it's very institutionalized. And I belong to all these parts. The noise electronica world, where I perhaps feel most welcomed, is just anarchy, and it's less money, and it's but it's also very, very welcome because no one questions you. But this is one reaction we had after a female was headlining a big concert in Brooklyn. I think it was in 2003, maybe. It was almost inspiring and liberating to step into a field that was absolutely male-dominated. Also, there are exceptions there, but like, to so great extent that we could create our own box from scratch. There was no inner image of being a woman there at all as well. Yes. Oh, sorry. Okay. But so this is the norm. This is the norm at the millennium change of this kind of new music, including electronic music, improvised music. This is the norm, not this. You know, this is punk. So we wouldn't see these guys dressed up like this, would they? I talked about forming our own books. This is our debut album with female. Sykler fra helvete, Sewing Club from Hell. The vinyl is pink. The contents is brutal noise music. Thurston Moore hailed this record as the best noise album ever, and then we got concerts everywhere. And I showed you this quote. We used it as a title for a work. Here is reviewed by Anne Hilde in The Wire. And then back to the genres. Are you finished reading this? Yeah. This is Rune Grammofon in his book in 2003. He made an art book. It's an interview. Kim Hjorte interviewed him. And he says, and before I knew it, I was sitting up there with the 4 girls in Spunk. This is how we came to the label, yeah. And I thought it was pretty far out, you know, but it was also very cool. And I thought that they were making a kind of music that men can't make. And I think they still are. And I think he still thinks that also. And later on in the interview, if I'm to say what it is, yeah, how do I say this? They have a form of, and the dots are included in the interview. It's a different kind of playfulness, a different approach, which I think boys or men would sometimes find a little not serious enough in a way. Not like this, you know. But, I mean, we play serious music. What the heck? Joelle Leandre once told me, it's no wonder that guys and other women don't want to play this kind of music. She was ironing her shirt on the backstage. They don't want to do this. They want to have a good life. They don't want to sit on a train in the night and wearing the same shirt the next day for a concert and there is no backstage. This is an occasion from before Christmas where I had a huge concert in the Polish radio. I was invited to play in the main hall of the Polish radio, where people like Ligeti and Ratkje and Arne Norheim had worked and gave huge concerts, and I gave huge solo concerts based on the work by Jushin Rudnik, which is an electronic pioneer, and he was at the concert, and he came up and was very happy after the concert, and he wanted to take the applause with me, and then he gave a speech to the audience in Polish. I didn't understand what he was talking about. And then I was told by the organizers afterwards that he was saying that if he was younger, he would have liked to be in a duo with me in more than one way. Well, I didn't think it was funny, but it is. That happened afterwards. Then at the very, very end of things, I want to show you a research very quickly that shows, it's published in the American Physical Society. It's a research somebody made. You can look at it. I can leave it here. I have it at home. Where they look at what helps for female students to want to have a scientific career, because this is also a problem in science, of course, underrepresentation of females. And the thing that helps by far the most is that they are discussing the underrepresentation. And that we have a general discussion about it, not necessarily led by a female, but that is the thing I want to emphasize the most, that we have to put names on the boxes, and then let's step out of them or just make them wider. Thank you.